Have you ever stood before the ruins of an ancient temple and felt something stir deep within you? An unexplainable sensation, as if the stones themselves were whispering secrets older than time. We are told, in school and in history books, that temples were built as places of worship, monuments to gods, symbols of devotion, centers of community life. And yet, if you have ever visited one with a quiet mind, you know there is something far more profound at work. You sense it in the stillness, in the perfect proportions, in the way light and shadow dance upon carved walls. It is as if the temple itself is alive, humming with an intelligence you can almost hear. What if I told you that ancient temples were not merely houses for gods, but machines for the transformation of human consciousness? That their pillars, chambers, and sanctuaries were designed with the precision of both engineer and mystic, not to impress the eye, but to awaken the soul. You see, modern architecture is built for function and comfort, but in the ancient world, the highest function was not convenience, it was transcendence. The ancients knew that stone could hold memory, that shapes could channel energy, that sound could alter the mind. They built temples not simply to honor the divine, but to connect with it, through structures that acted as living instruments, finely tuned to the forces of the cosmos. In this video, we are going to journey into that forgotten truth. We will explore why the greatest civilizations, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Hindus, the Mayans, all devoted unimaginable resources to the construction of sacred spaces. We will look at what ancient texts, from the Emerald Tablet to the Rig Veda, hint about these holy places. We will uncover how temples were aligned with stars, how their geometry mirrored universal laws, and how stepping inside one was intended to transform the human being from the inside out. And perhaps most importantly, we will discuss how this knowledge can still be used today, because you don't have to live in ancient Egypt or walk the stones of Angkor Wat to experience the temple's true purpose. The principles that shaped those sacred spaces are eternal, and they are waiting for you to remember them. So, take a deep breath, clear your mind, and imagine stepping into a doorway, not just of stone, but of time. Beyond it lies the real reason ancient temples were built, and it may just change the way you see the world. To understand the real reason ancient temples were built, we must first step back, not just a few centuries, but thousands of years, into a world where there was no separation between science, art, and spirituality. For the ancients, geometry was sacred, astronomy was divine law, and architecture was the physical language of the cosmos. In ancient Egypt, temples were not randomly placed. Each one was carefully allied to celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, the rising of Sirius. This was not simply for agricultural calendars. The Egyptians believed that when a temple's axis aligned with a star, it became a bridge between the mortal and the eternal. In their texts, the temple was often described as the horizon of the god, a place where heaven and earth met in harmony. Every pillar, every corridor, every statue was designed with symbolic meaning, each a teaching tool in stone. The Greeks inherited much of this wisdom. For them, the temple was not just a house for a deity, but a perfected form, an embodiment of cosmos, the order of the universe. The Parthenon in Athens, for example, follows the golden ratio, a proportion believed to reflect divine harmony. Stepping into such a space was meant to subtly tune the human mind to the same harmony that governs the stars. Further east, in India, Hindu temples were conceived as mandalas, three-dimensional diagrams of the universe. The sanctum at the center represented the source of all creation, while the outer halls mirrored the layers of existence one must journey through to return to the divine core. The temple's structure itself was a spiritual map guiding both body and consciousness toward liberation. Among the Maya, we find another layer of sophistication.
Their temples were not only aligned to astronomical events, but also constructed to manipulate sound. Certain pyramids could reflect a handclap into the cry of a sacred bird, reminding visitors that they were in a place where natural and supernatural merged. In all these cultures, the temple was a school, an energy chamber, and a cosmic tuning fork. It was where initiates underwent transformation through ritual, vibration, light, and shadow. The architecture itself was part of the teaching, subtly impressing upon the visitor the laws of balance, symmetry, and sacred proportion. Philosophically, this all rests on a profound belief that human beings are not separate from the universe, but microcosms of it. Just as a temple mirrors the cosmos, so too does the human body and soul. When one enters a sacred space built according to cosmic principles, they enter resonance with the universe itself. The temple becomes not just a place you visit, but a place that works on you, shaping your thoughts, emotions, and even your energetic field. This is why so many ancient temples were guarded by priests and initiates, and why access to the innermost sanctum was restricted. The temple was considered a powerful instrument, and like any instrument, it required skill to use. To enter unprepared was to risk being overwhelmed by the very forces it was designed to channel. The great tragedy is that today, much of this knowledge has been forgotten or dismissed as superstition. We walk through the ruins of Karnak or the stones of Delphi as tourists, admiring their beauty, but missing their function. But if we learn to see through ancient eyes, we discover that these structures are not relics of a primitive past, but surviving fragments of a science more complete than our own, a science that understood that the greatest journey is the one from matter to spirit. And it is this hidden science, encoded in walls and pillars, that will form the foundation of our next step, uncovering exactly how these temples were designed to transform the human soul.
Imagine for a moment that you step into an ancient temple not as a tourist, but as a seeker, an initiate invited to experience what the structure was truly meant to do. The moment you pass through its gates, you are no longer in ordinary space. You have entered a designed reality, a space built with the same care and intention as a master craftsman tuning a fine instrument. And you are that instrument. The ancients understood something profound, that human consciousness could be altered, refined, and elevated by manipulating the environment. Temples were the original technologies of the sacred. Their architecture, orientation, and materials were all chosen to produce specific effects on the mind, body, and energy of anyone who entered. First, there is sacred geometry. The floor plan of many temples is based on ratios found throughout nature: the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, the square root of 2. These proportions are not mere aesthetic choices. They mirror the mathematical patterns underlying galaxies, seashells, and the human body. When you stand inside such a proportioned space, your nervous system unconsciously aligns to its harmony. You feel at peace without knowing why. Next, alignment with the heavens. Many temples are constructed so that sunlight, at a precise day and hour, will illuminate the altar or the inner sanctum. This moment of illumination is not just a spectacle, it's a ritual in light, reminding the initiate of the cyclical nature of time and the link between the earthly and the celestial. The temple becomes a clock of the cosmos, and standing inside it, you too are synchronized with the movements of the stars. Then, acoustics. Some ancient structures are built so that a whisper can carry across a hall, or a chant will resonate for seconds longer than in the open air. This was no accident. The human voice, especially in mantra or prayer, produces vibrations that affect the body and mind. The temple amplifies these effects, bathing the listener in layers of sound that can induce trance-like states or deep meditative calm.
Material choice was also deliberate. The Egyptians, for example, often used granite in certain chambers because of its high quartz content, which responds to sound vibrations. Chants, drums, or even footsteps could set the stone humming faintly, an energy that sensitive individuals could feel in their bones. And let us not forget symbolic architecture. Every column, every carving was a silent teacher. In the Luxor temple, for example, the layout has been said to mirror the proportions of the human body, symbolizing the journey of life force energy from the base of the spine, the temple's entrance, to the crown, the innermost sanctuary. Walking through such a structure is not just physical movement, it is a spiritual enactment of awakening. In essence, temples were living diagrams of universal truths. They were maps you walked through, experiences you could inhabit. And the farther you moved toward the center, the more refined the energy became, until you reached the sanctum, the most potent point of the structure. This was the heart of the temple, where the veil between human and divine was the thinnest. The real genius of the ancients was that they didn't just teach these truths, they built them. They made them experiential. In a world without modern screens and devices, the temple itself was the interface between humanity and the infinite. But what exactly happened in that sanctum? What forces were being channeled? And how did the ancients ensure they could be accessed safely? That's where the second half of our core explanation takes us, into the deepest, most hidden function of these sacred structures.
To step into the inner sanctum of an ancient temple was to step into the very heart of the mystery. Few were ever permitted this far, not because the priests wanted to guard it for themselves, but because the space was potent. Just as you would not place an untrained sailor at the helm during a storm, you would not bring an unprepared mind into the temple's most charged chamber. The ancients believed that the sanctum acted as a convergence point, a place where cosmic energies, the Earth's natural magnetism, and human consciousness could meet in perfect resonance. This was the navel of the world, the axis mundi, the vertical thread that connects heaven, earth, and the underworld. But how did they create such a place? The secret lies in layered design principles. Energetic concentration. The layout often funneled movement inward through a series of narrowing spaces. Each chamber acted like a filter, stripping away distraction. By the time you reached the sanctum, your breath was slower, your mind quieter, your senses sharper. Resonance chambers. Many inner sanctums were small, enclosed, and made of materials that responded to sound. In Egypt's Temple of Hathor at Dendera, certain rooms amplify low frequencies, creating a physical sensation in the body. Chanting here wasn't just symbolic, it altered your biology, shifting your brainwaves toward theta or delta states, ideal for visions and deep meditation. Symbolic saturation. Every inch of the sanctum was layered with symbols, lotuses, serpents, celestial maps. These were not mere decoration, they were visual mantras, designed to bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the subconscious, planting seeds of awakening. Controlled light and darkness. Light often entered the sanctum through a single shaft or opening, sometimes only during specific times of the year. This controlled illumination created an otherworldly effect, as if the divine itself had arrived in the form of a beam. The play of darkness and light was a direct mirror of the journey from ignorance to enlightenment. The charge of ritual use. Over decades, even centuries, the repeated prayers, chants, and meditations performed in the sanctum charged the space. Sensitive visitors can still feel this today, an almost electric atmosphere that transcends mere imagination. Modern science calls this the place memory phenomenon,
The ancients simply understood it as the lingering presence of the divine. What's fascinating is that these spaces worked on multiple levels. For the uninitiated, the temple could be a place of beauty and awe. For the trained seeker, it was a precise technology for transformation. The sanctum was not only symbolic, it was functional. In mystical terms, the temple was the external body of the divine, and the sanctum was its heart. Entering it was a reenactment of entering the deepest part of your own being. The silence, the vibration, the geometry all were there to strip away the layers of false identity, to help you remember your true nature. And here lies the real reason temples were built. They were tools to turn ordinary humans into awakened beings, not through dogma, but through direct, immersive experience. The structure itself was the teacher, and the lesson was wordless. The tragedy is that most of us now walk through such places without understanding their purpose, like someone holding an ancient musical instrument but never playing a note. Yet the principles that shaped them are timeless. They can still be applied today, even without a grand temple of stone. Which brings us to the most important question. How can you use this knowledge now in your own space to awaken the same transformation the ancients sought?
You may not have a 1,000-ton block of granite in your living room, nor the architectural mastery of an ancient temple builder, but the underlying principles that made those sacred spaces transformative are not bound to stone. They are principles of energy, space, sound, and intention, and you can weave them into your own daily life. The first key is sacred geometry in space. The ancients designed with proportions that echoed natural harmony. You can bring this into your own environment by arranging your space with balance and symmetry. Even something as simple as creating a meditation area with a circular mat, a symmetrical arrangement of objects, or a mandala on the wall begins to train your mind toward harmony. If possible, align your space with natural light sources. Perhaps orient your chair toward the sunrise, just as temples aligned to the rising sun or a specific star. The second key is the use of sound. Temples amplified chants and mantras for a reason. Sound bypasses the rational mind and influences the nervous system directly. Begin your day or your meditation with vocal toning, humming, or chanting. Even a single sustained Om can shift your state. If you live in a noisy area, use a small bell, a Tibetan singing bowl, or a recording of temple chants to reintroduce intentional sound into your space. The third key is symbolic saturation. Surround yourself with symbols that resonate with your personal spiritual journey. This could be an image of a lotus, a simple geometric shape like the flower of life, or an astrological chart. Don't overload your environment. Select a few potent symbols and place them where your eyes will meet them often. Over time, these will work on you much like the carvings in a temple, subtly anchoring your subconscious to deeper truths. The fourth key is light and shadow. Ancient sanctuaries used carefully controlled light to evoke awe and focus. In your own space, you can play with lighting to signal transitions in consciousness. Use candles during meditation, dim lighting for reflection, bright natural light for clarity. Let the movement between darkness and light become part of your spiritual practice, reminding you of the inner journey from the unseen to the seen. The fifth key is ritual charging. Just as centuries of chanting charged ancient temples, repeated practice in a single spot will charge your own environment. Choose a space, a corner, a cushion, a chair, and return to it every time you meditate, pray, or perform spiritual work. Over time, the very act of sitting there will begin to shift your state instantly as your body and mind remember what happens in that place. You can also create personal pilgrimage moments. Instead of walking to a temple's sanctum, create a short ritual path in your home. Perhaps lighting incense at one end, walking mindfully to your seat, and pausing at symbolic points along the way. This simple act mirrors the progressive purification built into temple design. And remember, the ancients built temples as mirrors of the human body. You carry the ultimate sacred space within you. The spine is your pillar, your breath the sacred chant, your mind the inner sanctum. Every conscious breath, every moment of stillness is a step deeper into your personal temple. By consciously shaping your space and your daily actions with these principles, you activate the same forces the ancients sought to awaken. You begin to live in a state of subtle alignment where your environment becomes your ally, your thoughts are clear, and your energy is refined. In time, you will find that the temple is not something you visit, it is something you are. And from that realization, the wisdom of the ancients is no longer history, it is your living reality.
Across continents and millennia, the builders of Egypt, Greece, India, and the Americas poured their genius into stone, not to impress future tourists, but to craft environments that could transform the human soul. Temples were not static monuments, they were living instruments, tuned to the laws of the cosmos and the architecture of the human spirit. We have seen how sacred geometry aligned the mind with universal harmony, how sound and light were wielded like tools of initiation, how symbols spoke directly to the subconscious, and how the journey from the temple's outer walls to its sanctum mirrored the journey from the outer self to the divine within.